Coming to you today from the Intersection is my guest Amy Wan, founder of Bootstrap Legal and former general counsel at the real estate crowdfunding website Patch of Land. Welcome to the National Real Estate Forum podcast, episode 212. Thank you for joining me today. I am Dr. Adam Gower and this is the Crowdfund project at nreforum.org, where developers, investors and industry leaders share insights that you can use to raise capital, build wealth and earn passive income from crowd-funded real estate deals. I just returned from a housing conference in Los Angeles where I met my guest from a couple weeks back, Eve Picker, founder and CEO of the crowdfunding portal Small Change, in person for the first time. Eve's mission is to provide finance to those creating impactful, community-oriented projects and who otherwise may not be able to find the capital that they need. As though in complete contrast to that, I then trundled down to Newport Beach to meet with a future guest of mine, Chuck Schreiber, CEO of the real estate firm KBS. KBS have launched a real estate crowdfund platform to raise $500 million to invest in city centre office buildings. This is, of course, a far cry from the tiny home that Eve Picker is financing, but nevertheless also resides firmly in the sphere of crowdfunding real estate. In fact, despite overseeing very different asset classes within real estate, both Eve and Chuck are highly driven by a desire to do social good in all the investments that they make. They just have different methodologies for doing that. Anyway, I'm putting together some educational courses that explain the underlying real estate principles behind the different platforms and their investment strategies, and was explaining to my wife the KBS thesis. I was telling her about the course I am building to explain how a downtown office skyrise operates, why it's a relatively stable investment, how they produce income for their owners, etc. Why, she asked, would anyone but the ultra-wealthy have any interest in that? Who but they can afford to buy a downtown office building? Well, that is precisely the wonder of crowdfund real estate. Anyone can invest in a downtown office skyrise in exactly the same way as the ultra-wealthy of America have always been able to, and, more importantly, in precisely the way in which they have built their wealth and earned passive income over the years. Crowdfunding real estate is the levelling of the playing field and, to mix metaphors, the democratization of real estate. If you would like for me to unravel some of the complexities of real estate investment, from learning how to raise $500,000 for a little home you might want to build in a downtown neighborhood, to how to invest in a $500 million office skyrise deal, contact me at the nationalrealestateforum.org website, nreforum.org/contact. I will send you some information absolutely free that will change the way you view real estate and your ability to raise money or to invest. That's nreforum.org/contact. This theme of social conscience and doing good for society is continued with my guest today, Amy Wan of Bootstrap Legal, who describes her fascination with the intersection between money, morality and justice. Amy sees the crowdfund real estate industry as a way in which everyone now has access to capital that may previously been out of their reach. Not only that, but having gone out on her own now, looking to bring legal services within reach of even the smallest developer. You can find a link to her website at the show notes page for this episode at nreforum.org/bootstrap. Amy is one of the foremost thought leaders in the industry today, as you shall hear.
Hi, Dr. Gower. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. This time I am expecting your call.
Okay, good. I'm delighted. Thank you. It's funny because I actually work in an incubator, so I'm at the crossroads of real estate and tech, and I taught a course in real estate at Cal Poly. One of my students, he got a job with one of the incubator companies, and he keeps calling me Dr. Gower. He's the only person in the world that does, but I succumbed this morning and told him he could call me Adam, so he was quite flattered. He felt like it.
So funny.
Anyway.
Well, I looked at your website, and you have it's incredibly impressive. You have so many people on there with so many PhDs.
That was series number 1. Series number 2 is entirely focused on real estate crowdfunding,
Wow.
which I think is a very, very interesting field. And I would love to know about how you work in that field and what you've been doing. So maybe, if you don't mind, maybe we can kick off with crowdfund real estate in mind. Perhaps we could kick off, tell me a little about your background and where you're from. And I know you went to one of the best schools in the world.
You're not biased at all.
Not in the slightest bit, no. So let's start with what that school is, because we do want everybody to know that we both went to the same school and that it is the best in the world. And from there, how that school is, because we do want everybody to know that we both went to the same school and that it is the best in the world. And from there, how did you end up in California and dealing with crowdfund real estate? So let's start at the beginning.
Sounds good. Well, I am a graduate of LSE, the London School of Economics, as well as USC, the University of Southern California. I am actually a California native, so I was born and raised out here in LA and, left for a couple years for colder climates, spent a year in London doing my LLM, a couple years in DC doing international trade policy. And while I was out in DC, I met the guy who would become my husband. He was finishing med school at the time, and if you know anything about the medical profession, you end up going for your residency or training wherever this Nobel Prize winning algorithm tells you to go. So the algorithm told him to go to LA, so he went to LA.
Okay.
I followed him, but international trade policy doesn't really happen out in LA, so I pretty much had to start my career anew. And the one true common thread in my career is I've always been very intrigued by the intersection of money and morality and justice. I actually went to law school to be a human rights attorney and found out that human rights doesn't, really cross borders very well. But, when I moved out to LA, I became general counsel of a fledgling company at the time called Patch of Land. And Patch of Land today is one of the leading real estate crowdfunding platforms. They, in particular, focus on syndicating.
Did you enter? Because crowdfunding real estate has only been legal for the last couple of years, right? 2-3 years?
Yes. So the company really began at the end of 2013 when the first of the Jobs Act regulations became effective. And that law was called Regulation D, Rule 506C, as in cat.
Right.
And that law basically says, hey, you can go out and raise capital. You can tell everyone about it. In layman terms, this is called, this is advertising, but in legalese we call it general solicitation. And you can raise as much as you want, but you can only raise it from accredited investors. And accredited investors are essentially rich people, right? And so this regulation was brand new. It just became effective. So they began doing deals, and one independent contractor when I joined. So me and another guy joined the same day. So we were effectively employees 1 and 2.
How did you find them? Or how did they find you? And what was it that attracted you to this slightly wacky idea? I mean, just going out there selling real estate deals on the internet is a far cry from human rights, international human rights, right? Right.
So I would like to say that there's real estate in my blood. My family does, real estate on the side. So it was already something I was interested in, right? Gosh, I think I found them through a lot of different avenues. So I saw them on AngelList. I was on a Women in Tech listserv, and someone posted about them on the listserv, but at the time they weren't hiring an attorney. And I guess I just checked back a couple weeks later, and suddenly it looked like they were hiring a general counsel. So I went in, and I put a magazine down on the CEO's desk, and the magazine had my picture on it, right? And it was the American Bar Association Journal, and it was like, oh, here are the top 10 women to watch in legal technology. And I was like, you should hire me. They hired me.
Good.
But the reason why I joined Patch of Land was because, again, I was looking for something at the intersection of money and morality. And, you know, over the years, my belief in human rights has evolved quite a bit. I joined Patch of Land because, on one hand, I thought that they were democratizing access to capital to, you know, a class of people that traditionally haven't had great access to it. In this case, it was, you know, perhaps underbanked, but often, you know, fix and flip developers who banks simply just don't make these types of loans, right? And then on the other hand, for investors, I thought they were democratizing access to investment opportunity because, you know, for me, I am female, I'm Asian, I'm relatively young. People don't look at me and think, oh, there's a real estate investor. Let me approach them about this opportunity. Oftentimes, you know, the best deals go to people in this old boys club, you know, people who are in country club and they are a certain race, they're a certain, you know, gender, they are a certain age, right? They don't come to people who look like me. And so I thought, wow, that's a really powerful, really great thing.
That's really interesting. You know, we can come back to that. Let me step back a moment, though, because there's one segue that I'm missing, and that is the segue into tech. This idea that you've got the old boy, old staid way of doing real estate meeting this millennial generation of technology and technology platforms and online marketing and online business. So first of all, how did you get into tech? Why do you think that tech would match well with this old staid industry of real estate?
Sure. I think I've just been interested in tech for a long time. You know, growing up in California, it's always been everywhere. For me, I started personally getting to tech before I ever got into real estate crowdfunding because when I was a law student, you know, I would go during the summers and work in law firms, and we would be doing things the way lawyers did things in, I don't know, like 1980, right? Like doing things the way lawyers did things in, I don't know, like 1980, right? Like we were printing out briefs and binding them by hand and asking a courier to come over and drive it over to the courthouse. And I would just kind of look at all of this and be super complex and be like, why can't we just upload it to the court? Like, why are we doing all of this? So, you know, I think for me personally, my personality has always been very geared towards efficiency. And the legal industry is one of extreme inefficiency. In fact, it's incentivized by inefficiency, and that's never quite sat well with me. So personally, like, I believe that if we can infuse technology in the legal industry, then I believe we can actually increase access to justice, bring down treachery. I also think we're still very much at that very nascent stage, right? There were times when, you know, as legal counsel for Patch of Land, I would look at a process, for example, the loan closing process, and be like, hey, this is still very inefficient. Like, why isn't this digital? Why can't we streamline this? And unfortunately, our system, especially in the U.S., has developed in this very archaic, regulated manner that today it's very difficult to digitize the process. So for one example, you know, to go and notarize a document, you know, as much as people talk about e-notaries or electronic notarization, remote notarization is actually, you know, except you really can't do it. The concept of e-notary is the notary still comes over and sits next to you and opens a laptop and notarizes right there. Like, to me, that's nonsensical, right? Or the fact that when you have a note that you're dealing with, now they have electronic notes and they've got this whole system called MERS, but it brings about this whole new plethora of issues because, under UCC, under the Uniform Commercial Code, who owns the note? Like, he or she who has physical possession of the note often is the one in many states that wins out. But when the note is digital, who actually has physical possession of the note? Some people would actually argue that it's this MERS system, that's this electronic repository. So there's so many legal regulatory issues today in real estate that still make it super inefficient. But I think, we're slowly and surely getting there. It's going to take a lot more time, more innovation, and a lot more investment dollars.
Yeah, so let's definitely talk about Bootstrap Legal in a moment. But when you walked into Patch of Land, did you see an opportunity to somehow contribute to changing the legal industry? Did that give you a sense of optimism in any way, that here was an opportunity for you to make a difference perhaps in the way that contracts are executed, formed, structured, or delivered, or whatever, the legal process behind real estate? Was that part of your calculus, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think personally, I've always been searching for a way to do things better, do things more efficiently, and being general counsel, right, the leader of, the leader of the legal section of the company, and B, just being in a startup gives one a lot of license to kind of reinvent practice the way it could be or the way it should be.
So how does it work on a site like that? And you don't have to get too much into detail on Patch of Land necessarily, but in general, in the crowdfunding space, are contracts standardized? So you've got all these fix and flippers coming to a website. They want to raise money. Are they bringing their own contracts and the website is just a marketplace and you've got to wade your way through them, or are they standardizing?
So if you look at the spectrum of real estate crowdfunding platforms out there, and you analyze them closely, what you actually come to find is that every real estate crowdfunding platform is different, right? Some are broker-dealers, some are sponsors, some are listing companies, some do commercial, some do residential, some do equity, some do debt. And so everyone is a little bit different. And so everyone, I would say that for the vast majority of real estate crowdfunding platforms out there, a lot of them have their own standardized forms. And, they try not to deviate from those standards too much, because when you deviate from your standard, that increases the transactional cost, right? So very rarely do we ever negotiate forms, but you have to also remember we were lenders A and working in residential fix and flip debt B. And so the amount of the transaction is very small, so you're really forced to keep your transactional costs very low, versus if you're going to go and syndicate the equity of a multi-million-dollar building, the platform, depending on how they're structured, is probably going to spend a little extra time negotiating the rights and the responsibilities and the obligations and the returns of the platform investors.
Okay, so at a site like Patch of Land, where you had what you're describing, I think, is more of a commoditized product that's passing through its doors, you're able to create these standard documents. So is that the same on both sides of the equation, that the developer or the fix and flipper comes in and you say, if you want to raise money on our site, here's the contract you need to sign, and these are the contracts you need to use. And then on the investor side, similarly, the agreements are completely standardized. Is that how it works?
So on the borrower side, at least in real estate debt crowdfunding, oftentimes the platform, which is the lender, will negotiate terms with the borrower. The borrower can accept them, or maybe they go to a different lender. But if they accept the terms of the loan, then they will, issue a note, fund the loan, very little negotiation in that process.
Okay.
On the investor side, when the platform is syndicating the debt out to its investor base, there is actually no negotiation. So first part with the borrower, that's all, real estate law and lending law. The second part of the process is securities law, because you're dealing with investors. And under securities laws, you cannot give one investor A and another investor B. It's not supposed to work like that, right? You're supposed to treat all your investors equally. Yeah.
And that's because you were selling debt. So a patch of land, you'd see a deal that you liked, you would finance it, and then you would back it, and then you would backfill that you would then syndicate it. But from the borrower's perspective, you'd already financed it. You were just going out to the market almost as a secondary market, were you? Is that how it works?
Well, each of the real estate debt crowdfunding platforms works differently. Some of them pre-fund the loan, like patch of land, so they might have a credit facility, right? They'll pre-fund the loan, and then and essentially get paid back when they syndicate it out to platform investors. Others will not pre-fund the loan. Instead, they will put the terms out to the borrower. If the borrower says yes, then they put it out to the investor base. The investors fund it, and that's how the loan gets funded.
Got it, right. So from the borrower's perspective, it's a bit more risky to go that route because they might not actually fund it.
Right, and sometimes these platforms will put something out there that's like, if it's at least 50% funded but not fully funded, we will contribute some capital and then continue syndicating out the debt and then get paid back. So that's the lending side. On the equity side, it can work the same way, but often from what I see, it's very market driven. They're often not going to fund it with their own funds because they can't necessarily guarantee that someone is actually going to want to buy it from them afterwards, and they may not want to become the equity owner. But some of them still do, right? And some of them have some sort of institution that sits there as a backup and performs this function for them. It also does depend on whether that platform is a broker-dealer, right? So broker-dealers or licensed broker-dealers have a lot of compliance that they need to take into account. And so they are regulated by FINRA, and, they often have to go back and ask FINRA, is it okay if we do this and that?
I've put together a summary of crowdfund real estate that explains the background to the industry and how you can make the most of this new way to invest in real estate. Contact me at the nationalrealestateforum.org website, nreforum.org/primer, and I will send it to you absolutely free. Fascinating. Just as we talk about this, and let's jump to what you're doing now in a moment, but I do want to share with you this. What's resonating in my mind, I'm not an expert in securities law, but I am an expert in the way that finance was conducted at the beginning of the 20th century and late 19th century. And it sounds very, very similar to me, that borrowers would go to a bank, it might be Kuhn Loeb or JP Morgan, whoever it was at the time, and look for a commitment to issue a stock or a bond of some sort. And that entity would then either take it to the market or they would guarantee that the issue would be successful. Once they made that guarantee, they would then go to the market. And if it was successful, they wouldn't have to put a penny up, but they would collect huge fees, right? Yeah, they might take a piece of it at the end of the day. The net result of that was that people invested based on the reputation of the lender. So that I could see this industry evolving to the point that, as it did in the early 20th century in banking, that you look at the lender, you look at the platform, and you think this platform is so successful, I don't really care what they're investing in or the details, but because they've guaranteed the loan, I'm going to invest in that, right? It's because it's on there, I'm going to invest in that. right? It's because it's on their platform.
Yeah, and what we have been seeing over the past couple years is, the platforms are not incentivized to invest in bad loans. Ideally, they would be investing in good ones so that their investors make good returns, right? And if they have their own skin in the game, that speaks more to the confidence of their underwriting. And so I think we have seen a trend, not just in real estate crowdfunding, but in crowdfunding as a whole, where if a platform, performs a lot of due diligence and has a high level of ability to curate and choose which are going to be the good opportunities, and they're only listing those deals on its platform, then a lot of the times investors, for better or worse, begin caring a little bit less, and they put more.
Right, but this is where, to me, there is jeopardy, right? Because right? Because, at the end of the day, the money trust of the early 20th century became too powerful and actually led to, major downturns and apparently very unstable. And it's out of that we ended up with the FRB. But if you look at the industry, the crowdfunding industry that we have now, how is the consumer, the investor, how can they possibly know what's going on behind the scenes, right? These days you look at a website, it might look good, but who the heck knows the standards and practices that are really happening behind that veil?
So, I think we've already seen a little bit of this, right? I would say the big difference is that now we have the internet and everybody on the internet talks. A lot of real estate crowdfunding investors, they'll go on BiggerPockets, they'll post about their investment. If the investment is not performing, they are definitely not silent about it and will warn everybody else on BiggerPockets. And from what I hear, there are actually sizable private investor groups that have formed based off of people just talking about all their different real estate crowdfunding investments, right? Like, have any of your deals from this platform defaulted? Have your deals from this platform defaulted, right? Now with the internet, news travels very, very, very quickly, and people talk when they're unhappy.
Well, that is an extremely fascinating insight and was completely different from what I had thought. And I think that is that you and I actually define our generations in the way we see this. Actually, right? Because I can tell you're a lot younger than I am. And just from the pictures that I see, and I know how old I am. But what I was thinking was that what is going to cause this discovery, if you like, who's swimming naked, to paraphrase Warren Buffett, will be when the next downturn hits. Right, there'll be
yes.
Right.
In certain ways, you are already seeing it. So, we're talking in September 2017. Already this year, two of the real estate crowdfunding platforms that were considered major contenders back in 2014, this year have gone under. So one of them is Asset Avenue, which went under, I think February of this year, and iFunding just went, or I'm not exactly sure what happened to them in the very end because, everything was relied on investors voting a certain way. But, depending on what happened with that vote, presumably they were supposed to shut their doors at the end of August.
Well, this is what makes this aspect of the industry so incredibly challenging, I think, particularly for investors, is that you've got a whole world of, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, but also from a regulatory perspective, this whole world of unsophisticated investors who are looking at an extremely sophisticated industry of real estate that's highly complex. But then you're also adding another layer to that, and that is the tech layer, right? So you might have a great platform. You might have a platform that's found some great deals, but if the platform fails, there's another layer of risk that you've got that you never had before.
Exactly.
In real estate.
Like I said, all platforms are structured very differently. one of the things, I put into place at Patch of Land while I was there was an indentured trustee structure, so that if something happened to the platform and the larger platform went under, well, the indentured trustee theoretically should be able to step in and administer and service and work with investors, independent of whatever happened to the platform. Now, but you're completely right, that is a risk. One of the key things I hear about iFunding is that they were trying to be very competitive and charge, in some cases, little to no fees. And because they were not bringing in, regular capital to keep their lights on, that's one reason why they became undercapitalized and went under. But that's one of very many reasons. But yes, so capitalized and went under. But that's one of very many reasons. But yes, so, platforms absolutely need to find some sort of sustainable way to keep their lights on. Increasingly, it's become extremely hard to get venture capital investment in real estate crowdfunding platforms just because of the plethora of platforms out there now. It's really only a handful of real estate crowdfunding platforms that are investable at this point by venture capital, and those are the ones who were, at the forefront really early back in 2011, 2012, 2014, right? Kind of everything that came afterwards, with the exception of maybe Pure Street and Cadre, I would say largely aren't really able to go get that kind of funding today. Now, even if they can get that funding, like yesterday, Realty Shares announced their Series C for $28 million. They are still on a model in which there's now the other big trend that I'm starting to see in real estate crowdfunding is the kind of like almost maybe the democratization of real estate crowdfunding. So instead of these large venture capital backed platforms, we're seeing the rise of all these tiny real estate companies that are putting forward their personal real estate crowdfunding platforms. So they're not raising money for other people, right? Instead, they're taking their old website, they're adding a browse investment button to their homepage, and the minute someone clicks that, they've licensed white label software that the back end is, it's completely built out already by another company. So the cost of technology or the tech development to build out a real estate crowdfunding platform has decreased dramatically.
See, now that's a very interesting...
Build out a real estate crowdfunding platform has decreased dramatically.
See, now that's a very interesting angle, isn't it? Because now you've got real estate developers kind of stepping beyond their friends and family, possibly even just locally, right? So you've got a local deal and you're planning to go in front of the planning department and, the local council, and you've got to deal with the neighborhood council to get something entitled and built and whatever else. And instead of going to friends and family, you can actually take it to the whole community, right?
Yes.
And actually do that efficiently.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's take a step towards what you're doing now, right? We've talked a lot about what you've done before, but now you've got this fascinating business. You left Patch of Land and now you're bootstrapping it. It's what I feel like I'm doing my entire life with everything. So what is Bootstrap Legal and how are you changing the world?
So after about a year as a partner of a law firm that used to be my outside counsel, and all they do is real estate syndication and real estate crowdfunding. And it was a great experience, but like I said, like the one common theme in my life has always been, looking towards economic justice and everything with an eye towards efficiency. And so, two things really bothered me while I was at the law firm. One thing was that, occasionally I would get calls from smaller clients who would be like, hey, I'm looking to raise $300,000 by a syndication. How much is that going to cost me? And I would tell them, look, like, I'm going to tell you the price, and then I'm going to tell you that you're just not going to do it because the transaction cost doesn't make sense, right?
It's going to cost you $300,000 to do it.
Right?
It's going to cost you $300,000 to do it.
Right. Like, if you're raising $300,000, the minimum that any firm is going to charge, like the absolute minimum, is probably going to be $10,000. I know some firms that would do 15, and others that would start at 25. It's just the transactional cost doesn't fit the size of the deal. And like you even see this in real estate crowdfunding, you get to a point where the transaction is so small, it doesn't make sense to do the transaction, right? Because the work you're still doing is the same whether you're raising, 1 million or 50 million, right? So that was one thing. I just realized that there's a lot of small deals out there that people were unable to hire an attorney to represent them because it just didn't make sense. And as a result, I saw these people going out and doing handshake agreements or paper napkining something or, downloading some rules. That was one aspect of it. And the second is this, whether you are in real estate or small business or whatever, one thing I've really come to believe is that, and you can even look at the economic stats for this, so much of this country is powered by small business, right? Much of the innovation and the patents that are filed by small businesses. Most people in the country that are employed by small businesses. Small businesses actually make up the vast majority of businesses in the country. And so when I see small businesses going out and trying to raise capital, I see this inherent, almost injustice, right? Because they don't have the money to afford an attorney. Oftentimes, they'll try and go out and do it themselves, but if they structure it the wrong way, the unfortunate part of fundraising is that once you take money and you structure it incorrectly, that haunts you for the rest of the life of your project or your business or whatever it is, right? I've literally seen startups that inadvertently gave away 80% of their company before they even get to their Series A, which is an awful thing. And so I see so much inefficiency in how the law is practiced today. I see a lot of injustice because, quite frankly, the price of legal services is too high. So I truly believe that if we can integrate technology into the practice of law, we can bring down the transactional cost of a lot of legal services, meaning more people can afford legal services, meaning more people can grow their businesses and then go and create jobs, hire people, and give people the dignity of employment. So what I'm trying to do to give people the dignity of employment. So what I'm trying to do today is, and we're starting off in the real estate sector, I am creating software that will automate highly complex legal documents that people need in order to raise capital. So what I'm talking about is the legal documents you need for a real estate syndication, real estate private equity fund, a real estate crowdfunding deal, right? Traditionally, this would have cost minimum $10,000, $15,000, $25,000. We are not only lowering the cost, but we're actually speeding up the transaction, right? If you go to an attorney, usually you won't get the first draft of your documents till 2 to 4 weeks later. We're turning them around in 48 hours now, and so that gives real estate syndicators an extra, potentially 28 days to be. Time is money.
How are you doing it, Amy? Are you using AI? Are you using kind of checkbox structure? How are you doing it?
So we started this endeavor with an eye towards integrating a lot of AI. Over the past couple months, we've found other creative ways to get to where we want to be. So, it is AI light in the sense that there are a lot of rules and it is an expert system. But, basically the idea is that the user goes in, they answer in adaptive questionnaires. So, the system will ask them, well, are you doing a single asset syndication or a semi-specified fund or a blind pool, right? It'll ask them, well, which regulation are you trying to use? Who are you raising capital from? It'll ask you, well, what kind of real estate are we dealing with? And based on all these different inputs that the user answers, a lot of language in the document either goes in or goes out. We've really taken, years of real estate fund documents and parsed out the logic and built it back up, right? So we're able to turn around and draft the first draft of these documents a lot faster with more precision, speed, accuracy, and lower cost. And at the end of this month or early next, we're actually going to be launching a new product that's going to help with the advisory side. Because one common complaint I get, and I've had this problem as well, is, people are genuinely afraid to pick up the phone and call their attorney because they're afraid that they're going to be billed
right.
$500 for a simple question, right? And it's happened to me before when I was in-house counsel. So what we're launching an attorney that actually specializes in real estate securities and real estate investing. So they get highly specialized advice. They don't have to be afraid to pick up the phone. The cost is predictable. It's not going to run away with you. You're not going to end up with some $1,500 legal bill for some legal memo that you didn't ask for.
Right. So who are your prospects as far as clients? Are they developers? Are they investors?
Right. So we went the direct-to-consumer route, meaning our client base today is real estate syndicators or investors or sponsors, basically anyone who's trying to raise capital for a real estate project. Now, ever since we launched, we've actually gotten a good number of calls from law firms that do this, and they've been wanting to license their software. So that's a route that we're considering going. We just, haven't quite gotten there yet, but, we're going. We just, haven't quite gotten there yet, but, we're analyzing all aspects of the market.
So when you say investors, when I say investors, what I mean is people who want to invest in deals. But you're talking about people who have a building at the corner of Walk and Crosswalk, and they want to do some value add and, sell it. So they've got a business plan and they need to raise some money.
Yeah. And
they want to put together some kind of offering memorandum, or they want to run a Reg CF or whatever it is, a Reg D or whatever, some form of raising capital. And they come to your site and they fill in a fairly detailed questionnaire, and out of the other end of it pops a tailored contract that they can take to market. Is that a decent description?
Yes. And there is a little bit of attorney involvement, right? Because, there are just some things that we're to do. But our goal is to automate maybe 80% of the process. And if you can do that, then I think you cut down on a lot of human time. So you cut down on a lot of the transactional costs, meaning you're actually opening up the market to a lot of smaller transactions.
And will you be able to, would you also guide people through the process?
So today, our system only does it for Regulation D, so 506B and 506C.
Okay.
Now,
is anyone doing Bs anymore? Who does Bs? You only do a B if you want unaccredited, right?
I mean, 99% of people are still doing B.
Bs? Really?
Yeah. If you look at the size of the market, in the past 3 years, I think 506C raised maybe $3 billion, and 506B raised 506C raised maybe $3 billion, and 506B raised I don't even know, trillions.
Yeah, really. Is that just because people don't know about it, or they just have their friends and family aren't tapped out yet?
Well, the thing is, a lot of real estate sponsors or developers, their business has evolved in such a way that they already have these long lists of credit investors that they work with, right? So unless the capital runs dry and everyone on their list runs out of money to invest, they haven't necessarily had to move to C yet. And the other issue is that under 506C, the sponsor has to take reasonable steps to verify that someone actually is an accredited investor. And that it's not a hard process, but it's also not an easy process. Investors don't want other people to know their net worth or exactly where their wealth comes from, or they don't want to give that information. And so sometimes under 560, certain investors still become a little bit reluctant to disclose the information that's needed to verify their status.
So do you think that that is a barrier to the growth of B?
You mean to C?
I mean C, sorry, yes.
It is, right? And, I've personally had to verify tons of credit investors under 560. It's not the worst thing in the world, but there is a little pain to it, right? There are some people who have had that experience and they absolutely hated it, right? And so, and then there are other times where if you have been taking money from X investor for the past 10 years and suddenly you're asking them to send you all this information.
A bank statement. Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Suddenly they're not very happy because they're like,
right.
We've already had a working relationship for 10
right.
years. Why do you need this information now? So what I see oftentimes is that a lot of people who are contemplating doing C, they'll do one 506C deal and then follow it up with a number of 506Bs for their normal investors. They use the 506Cs to reel in or bring in new investors.
One of the statistics that I've seen, and I'm interested to know if this resonates for you, Amy, is that there are 10.8 million or so accredited investors in the U.S., but that only 300,000 or so have actually invested in a real estate deal as an accredited investor. Those numbers, particularly the number of accredited investors that have invested, ability to you, or does that sound off?
I'm actually surprised it's that high.
Really?
If you really dig down into these accredited real estate crowdfunding platforms, you'll find that they have active investors, but not actually that many, right? Look, from what I see at my perspective, every investor has a different appetite. Some people love investing in real estate. Some people love investing in startups. Some people just sit on their money and they don't invest. Some people delegate out investing to some wealth manager and they don't even know what's in their portfolio, right? So you get a really wide range of people. Some people are very aggressive. Some only want capital preservation, and so they're in a bunch of bonds and stuff, So I guess I'm not that surprised. In the circles that I run in, people aren't just raising from friends and family, right? They have developed, lists that are 1 to maybe several hundred people long of accredited investors. And so, the people that work on these projects day in, day out, and they do several projects a year, they're definitely raising beyond friends and family. It's just that everyone tries to tap the same people, right? Once you hear that one guy invests in real estate, everyone goes after the same guy.
Knocking his door, right. Do you think it's inflationary, crowdfunding, on property values?
I'm not sure. So first of all, a lot of these investments are not liquid, right? There is a hold period of, on the equity deals, there's a hold period of often 5 to 7 years. On the debt deals, if it's a fix and flip loan, it should be for 12 or 18 months. But, if the borrower defaults and you're in a state like New Jersey where the foreclosure process takes years, it's going to be years before you ever get your money back. And there really is no secondary or exchange market for these securities today. I don't know that necessarily it's more inflationary. I do think, real estate crowdfunding helps the message get out there more to investors that hey, there are other easier ways to invest in real estate. What I will say, though, is that I believe that real estate crowdfunding has kind of brought down the returns of investors because, when it was a very closed private network system where people were raising money, and it was harder to find these investors and harder to talk about your deals, the investors had a lot more power. The lead investor probably had a lot more the lead investor probably had a lot more power to negotiate the terms of the offering, right? And in this case, it probably ends up on a platform. People have to take it or leave it. There's this like fear of missing out that's being created, and these are also people that maybe otherwise would not have had access to this investment opportunity. So they're investing on it, but maybe the terms at which they're investing are lower than the terms that, a traditional investor would have invested in if it were, a much more private offering 10 years ago.
Yeah, interesting, right. The pendulum has swung towards the developer in some way.
Yeah,
in that regard,
definitely.
right?
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, so what are your aspirations in the long term for Bootstrap? Where would you like to see Bootstrap Legal be? What do you hope will come of the company and the impact that you'll have?
Yeah, I mean, we're starting off in real estate, but we have our sights set a little bit higher than that. I would be very happy if we could change the user experience around the ability of people to interact with legal services. I think today the experience centers a lot around the attorney, and if we could take that and center it more around the client, I think everyone would be a little bit happier. I think if we could move away from the billable hour system, both attorneys and clients would be happier. I think if you can make things more efficient, decrease in transactional costs, clients would definitely be happier. And, if we can make any sort of impact in being able to create more jobs and things of that sort, I think my work would be done. But that's a high goal, so we'll see.
Well, I wish you absolutely the very, very best, Amy.
In an industry that is creating opportunity for developers, both small and large, to raise capital for their deals from sources never before available, i.e. the general public, it is reassuring that people like Amy Wan are out there doing what they can to make sure professional services follow suit. There's little advantage to having a great way to finance your deal if the way legal advice is dished out continues to make the process cost prohibitive. Amy's social conscience and her proactive approach to employing tech solutions for the benefit of us all is what puts her at the leading edge of her field and a great friend to have on your side. Please check out the show notes to this episode at the nationalrealestateforum.org website, nreforum.org/bootstrap, where you will find a link directly to Amy's website, Bootstrap Legal. In the next podcast, I have the pleasure of speaking to Adapir de Erico. Adapir was also one of the early executives at Patch of Land and more recently has been advising AlphaFlow, a platform that builds diversified real estate portfolios for investors using advanced data analytics. If you find these podcasts of interest and would like to know more about real estate crowdfunding, please let me know at the nationalrealestateforum.org website, nreforum.org/contact. I would love to hear from you. Be sure to let me know if you need help raising capital for a deal or if you are an investor looking for something to invest in. I would be happy to show you how you can do either or both. Thanks again for tuning in, and thank you also to Amy Wan, Legal Hacker, for sharing your time with me today. Until next time, this is Dr. Adam Gower, signing off.